The stage lights felt almost holy. On stage, my husband Julian, the investment guru of the hour, held up his new book like a sacred relic. We were at the launch party, on a rooftop venue in Midtown Manhattan, surrounded by New York's financial elite, sipping champagne and applauding him. "And I couldn't have written a single page of this guide to success," he said into the microphone, his voice dripping with the false modesty he had perfected, "without my true muse, a woman whose vibrant energy reminds me every day that the best investment you can make is in passion." I, his wife of 22 years, the woman who reviewed every chapter and balanced the books when his passions nearly bankrupted us, smoothed my dress in the front row, a frozen smile on my face. Then, his gaze didn't meet mine. It drifted to a corner table where Chloe, his 20-something protégé, was looking at him with pure adoration. The silence that fell over our table was deafening only to me. Our mutual friends suddenly found their shoes fascinating. As Julian began signing the first copies, I stood up calmly. All eyes turned to me, expecting tears, a scene. Instead, I walked to the stage. Julian saw me, his smile faltering, assuming I was coming to congratulate him. I stopped before him, and from my handbag I retrieved a small, dark, lacquered wooden box. I had restored it myself. I placed it on the stack of books in front of him. "What's this, darling?" he asked, forcing a tone of endearment for the audience. "A seed investment," I murmured, my voice steady, "for his ears only. For your new life. Open it later." I turned my back and walked out from the event, feeling the weight of 100 confused stares. The door closed behind me, but I knew that inside that box wasn't a gift. It was the invoice for a debt he had just incurred with the wrong person. Julian thought I was predictable. It was my greatest asset. To him, I was the trophy wife, the household manager, the keeper of his flawless image. He forgot that before I was Julian Croft's wife, I was Eleanor, with a degree in art history and a specialization in fine art appraisal. A charming hobby, as he liked to call it. The truth didn't appear all at once, but in drips, like a slow leak. It started about 8 months ago. High expenses for strategic consulting, angel investments in startups that never seemed to have a name. He claimed he was diversifying our portfolio for the future, while asking me to cut back on frivolous spending, like the upkeep on the Hamptons beach house I inherited from my parents before our wedding. Suspicion turned to certainty on a rainy Tuesday. Julian left his laptop open on our shared home office desk. A file in a folder named Personal Projects caught my eye. The file name was Elysian Digital Investor Pitch. I clicked. What I found was a detailed business plan for a financial and emotional wellness fintech company. The CEO? Chloe Miller. The plan mentioned a substantial seed investment already secured from the lead investor. I didn't need a bank statement to know where the money was coming from. The spreadsheets, the charts, the email chains, it was all there. They weren't just having an affair, they were building an empire with our money. With my sweat, which had ensured he had the capital to invest in the first place. A coldness that frightened even me settled over my body. The anger came, but it was an icy, precise anger. I could have confronted him right then and there, but what would that solve? He'd deny it, call me crazy, jealous. No, Julian, the master of narrative, would only understand one language: consequences. While he was planning his passionate new life, I started my own project. I discreetly hired the best family law firm in Manhattan. I spent weeks auditing every dollar that came in and out of our joint accounts for the past 5 years. More importantly, I began to catalog and obtain updated appraisals for every piece of art, every antique, and every piece of jewelry I inherited or bought with my own family's money before our wedding. Under our state's marital property laws, these were my separate property, something Julian, in his financial arrogance, always treated as mere decoration. He was building a sandcastle. I was reinforcing my stone fortress. Before Julian gets home for the confrontation, if you're already rooting for this plan to succeed, take a quick pause and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. The best part is just beginning. The door to our Park Avenue apartment flew open with a bang that rattled the crystal on the console table. It took him less than an hour. I was waiting for him in the living room, sitting in my favorite armchair with a tablet on my lap, calmly reviewing an auction catalog. "Eleanor, what the hell was that stunt back there?" Julian yelled, storming into the room. His face was red, the mask of the calm, centered guru completely shattered. He threw the small wooden box onto the coffee table. "Were you trying to humiliate me in front of everyone?" "Humiliation is an interesting concept," I replied, not looking up from my tablet. "It really depends on your perspective. You, for instance, didn't seem to mind mine when you dedicated your book to your muse." "Don't change the subject," he snarled, a vein throbbing in his forehead. "What's in this box? What seed investment?" "Open it and find out. Think of it as the first assignment in your new venture." With hands trembling from rage, he opened the box. Inside, there were no jewels or cash. There was a series of professional photographs printed on high-quality paper and a flash drive. He picked up the first photo. It was of the Rothko painting that hung in our foyer. The second was a Giacometti sculpture. The third, a set of heirloom jewelry from my grandmother. He shuffled through the pictures, confused. "What is this? An inventory? Have you lost your mind?" "No," I said, finally looking at him. My voice was as cold as the marble beneath his feet. "That is a notice. The flash drive contains copies of the updated appraisals for each of those items. It also contains copies of the emails my lawyers sent out today to every major auction house and art gallery in the country. They are now formally barred from accepting, appraising, or using any of those pieces as collateral." The color drained from his face. You can't do that. Those assets are ours. They're worth a fortune. They're meant to secure our future investments." I allowed myself a small smile. "This is where your financial genius fails you, Julian. We live in New York, an equitable distribution state. But these items, as the documents prove, were either inherited by me or purchased with my family's money before the marriage. Legally, they are my separate property, as untouchable as your last name. You saw them as decoration or a personal bank. I see them for what they are, my heritage, mine." He collapsed onto the sofa, stunned. "After 22 years, our marriage, our history, does that mean nothing to you? You'd throw it all away for some petty jealousy?" It was the move I expected, the emotional plea, the attempt to paint me as the irrational villain. I picked up my phone, which was already prepared. Our history meant everything to me, until I heard this. I pressed play. His voice, recorded by software I installed on our home office computer, filled the silence. It was a video call with Chloe. "She doesn't get business, babe. Eleanor lives in her world of art, of old things. Her hobby has made our apartment look like a museum. But the upside is that all this pricey decor is going to finance the entire launch of Elysian Digital. She won't even notice when I start to liquidate the pieces." Chloe's voice laughed on the other end. "You're a genius, my investor." Arthur turned sheet white. You recorded me? That's illegal. Not in your own home in New York, a one-party consent state, especially when the conversation is about a plan to fraudulently dispose of marital assets. And by the way, it wasn't my idea to look into your dealings.
He was quite disappointed. "Who's he?" Julian stammered. "Arthur Vance, your old mentor, the man who gave you your first job on Wall Street. I went to him for advice 2 months ago. I showed him the fintech business plan you forgot open on the computer. He wasn't shocked by the affair, but by your lack of ethics in using my separate property to collateralize a risky venture with your mistress. He said, and I quote, 'Integrity is the one asset that once lost, you can never recover.' In fact, it was Arthur who referred me to my law firm."
That was the final blow. The betrayal by his own idol was more than he could bear. "You have 24 hours to get your things," I said, standing up. "A petition for a contested divorce, including a motion for a forensic audit of all our joint accounts and the protection of my separate property, was filed this morning. Our wealth manager will be receiving a court order shortly. Your access to major funds will be limited." "You're destroying me," he whispered, defeated. "No," I corrected, walking towards my study. "I'm just collecting on a debt. You broke the contract. I'm just enforcing the terms." I didn't sleep in our apartment that night. The air felt contaminated by betrayal. I drove to my best friend Maya's pottery studio, a beautiful, airy space in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. She greeted me with a fierce hug and a glass of red wine, asking no questions. I saw. "I was at the launch with the gallery folks," she said, as we sat among clay sculptures and kilns. "That speech, it was disgusting, and your exit was the classiest thing I have ever seen." "Class is all I have left, May," I confessed, feeling the tension of the last few months finally start to give way. I explained everything to her. The fintech business plan, the discovery, the lawyers, the recording, the notice to the auction houses. Maya listened with a quiet fury on behalf of our 30-year friendship. "He always underestimated you. He always thought your talent was just some decorative pastime. Little does he know that appraising what's real and what's fake is what you do best." My phone buzzed. It was my niece, Clara, my older sister's daughter. Clara was 23, a law student at Columbia, currently interning at a major tech venture capital firm. "Aunt Elle, is everything okay? My friend's dad, who works in finance, sent a picture of you at the event. Said the vibe got weird. I'm coming over." "You don't have to, sweetie. I'm at Maya's studio." "I'm coming over anyway," she replied and hung up. 20 minutes later, Clara arrived, bringing with her the vibrant energy of youth and a worried look. I told the whole story again. When I got to the part about Elysian Digital, her eyes widened. "Wait a minute. Chloe Miller? Her startup was just accepted into my firm's accelerator program. I sat in on her pitch session. Aunt Elle, her business plan was flawless, way above the level of someone her age. We were all blown away." A chill ran down my spine. "Clara, the business plan wasn't hers. It was Julian's. I saw the drafts, the notes, everything on his computer." Clara pulled out her phone, typing furiously. "Aunt Elle, this is more serious than you think. She presented the project as 100% her own intellectual property. If we can prove that the IP actually belongs to Uncle Julian, and that he used marital assets to fund it without your consent, this isn't just a divorce issue. It's corporate fraud. The accelerator program has very strict clauses about this. She could be kicked out and forced to return all the seed money she received." We barely had time to process the information when the studio's buzzer rang. Maya went to answer and returned with a look of disgust. Guess who's here? The power couple of the year. Julian and Chloe walked into the studio. He looked desperate. She had an expression of defiant arrogance, clearly feeling like the new woman in charge. "Eleanor, we need to be reasonable. Freezing the assets is a childish move. Chloe has nothing to do with our problems." Chloe stepped forward. "Look, ma'am, I'm sorry your marriage wasn't working out, but the Elysian Digital project is mine. I had the idea. I developed it. Julian was just a mentor."
Clara, who had been quiet in a corner until then, stood up. Her posture shifted from concerned niece to ruthless law intern. Really, Chloe? Because your business plan is strangely similar to a master's thesis on emerging capital markets published by the University of Chicago 4 years ago. A thesis authored by Julian Croft. I know, because I cited it in my last law school paper. A well-executed plagiarism, I'll admit, but plagiarism nonetheless. Chloe's jaw dropped. Julian looked at her for the first time with an expression of panic and betrayal. Clearly, he didn't know she had been so careless.
"What are you talking about?" Chloe stammered. "I'm talking about fraud, Chloe," Clara continued with a terrifying calm. "And the firm I work for takes that very seriously. I guess your mentor forgot to warn you about the consequences of lying on an investment contract." Julian turned to me, his face a mask of desperation. "Eleanor, please, stop this. You're going to destroy this young woman's career. You're going to destroy me." "No," I said, feeling a strength that came from Maya by my side and Clara in front of me. "You destroyed yourselves. I'm just turning on the lights so everyone can see the mess." "I think you both should leave," Maya said, pointing to the door. "This space is for creating beautiful things, and the two of you, together, are the ugliest thing I've ever seen." They left, no longer as a power couple, but as two accomplices whose fraudulent story was about to collapse. What a takedown! Stories like this, where justice starts to be served, are the soul of our channel. If you felt the same satisfaction I did right now, hit that subscribe button to join our community and not miss the final courtroom showdown. The preliminary hearing took place in a sterile courtroom at the New York County Courthouse. Julian arrived with a visibly nervous lawyer, a young man from his social circle who clearly had no experience in high-asset divorce litigation. It was his first of many forced cost-cutting measures. On my side sat Ms. Evelyn Reed, a woman with silver hair and a gaze of steel, a legend in the field. She placed a neat stack of documents on the table, while Julian's lawyer fumbled with loose papers. The judge, a middle-aged woman who looked like she had seen it all, got straight to the point. "Miss Reed, your client's petition requests the continued protection of separate property and the freezing of joint accounts based on allegations of marital waste in breach of fiduciary duty. Proceed." "Your Honor," Ms. Reed began, her voice calm and sharp. "This is not a mere allegation. We have submitted forensic appraisals of all assets inherited by my client, proving her sole ownership. We have also submitted the business plan for a third-party company, Elysian Digital, which was funded with marital assets without my client's knowledge or consent, constituting a clear dissipation of the marital estate." Julian went pale. He looked at me across the table, a look of pure hatred and pleading mixed together. The judge shuffled through the documents, her expression growing more severe. "Mr. Croft, in this state, marital assets are to be distributed equitably, while you have the right to manage common assets, using them to secretly fund a venture with a third party, especially one based on intellectual property fraud, goes far beyond any good faith expected in a marital partnership. This is a straightforward decision." She brought down her gavel. "The freeze on joint accounts is to be maintained pending the full forensic audit. The administration of all inherited and separate property will remain exclusively with Mrs. Croft. Mr. Croft will be granted a monthly stipend for living expenses, to be drawn from his share of verifiably legitimate investments. The Park Avenue apartment, having been purchased with a significant down payment from Mrs. Croft's inheritance trust, will remain in her possession during these proceedings." Julian muttered "unbelievable" to his lawyer, who could only shrug, defeated. As we left the courtroom, he intercepted me in the hallway. His arrogance had evaporated, leaving only pathetic desperation. "Eleanor, think of our friends, our reputation. What will people say?"
"I think they're already saying it," I replied coldly. "I heard the news about the Elysian Digital fraud hit the tech trade publications. Your reputation as a mentor and investment guru, let's just say it's undergoing a significant market correction."
I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the courthouse corridor. He was no longer the titan of Midtown. He was just a small man drowning in the consequences of his own choices, with his most valuable assets, credibility and integrity, now completely worthless. A year later, the smell of oil paint and varnish had replaced the expensive fake perfume that once dominated my life. My consultancy, Accurato Art and Assets, occupied a charming floor in a historic building in Soho. I didn't sell dreams of quick wealth. I sold the truth. My specialty became helping other women in divorce proceedings to identify and appraise assets that were hidden or undervalued by their husbands. Justice, I discovered, was an excellent business model. Julian, I heard through the grapevine, was a shadow of his former self. His reputation in the financial district had disintegrated. The story of the Elysian digital fraud became a cautionary tale in investment circles. Chloe vanished, likely trying to reinvent herself in another city under another name. Most of our old friends distanced themselves from him, as they always do when the money and prestige dry up. He left our apartment and now lived in a rented condo in Murray Hill. The divorce was finalized on the exact terms Ms. Reed had laid out. I kept my inherited assets intact, possession of our apartment, and the majority of the liquid investments we could prove were untainted by his schemes. The justice was poetic. The charming hobby he had so despised became the fortress that protected my future, and the instrument that demolished his. We met one last time, by chance, at a gallery opening in Chelsea. He was noticeably thinner, the expensive suit unable to hide the air of defeat. "Eleanor, your business, I hear it's doing well. I'm happy for you." "Thank you, Julian. I made a terrible mistake," he said in a low voice, looking at the floor. "I was arrogant, blind. Is there any chance that we could—" "No," I interrupted, my voice not angry, just firm and final. "That door is closed, and the room has been renovated." He nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I get it. I hope you find happiness. I really do. You deserve it." It was perhaps the only honest appraisal he had ever made. Weeks later, having coffee with my niece Clara, she reflected on it all. "You know what's most ironic, Aunt Elle? Uncle Julian built a whole career teaching people how to value assets, but he never knew how to value the most precious one he had right in front of him. He looked at your paintings and saw dollar signs. He looked at you and saw a manager. He never saw the true worth of anything." She was right. The man who defined himself by what he owned lost everything because he failed to see the value in what he already had. The woman he defined by the things that surrounded her discovered her own identity. The wooden box I handed Julian at that event was not the beginning of my revenge. It was, in fact, the final appraisal of my marriage, and the verdict was clear: no market value, beyond repair. It was time to invest in a new acquisition: myself. Eleanor's journey shows that knowledge and composure can be the most powerful weapons. If stories of justice like this inspire you, your first action is to hit the like button so YouTube knows you enjoy our content. If you're not yet part of our community, subscribe now and turn on notifications to be the first to know about our next stories. And finally, a special request. We want to know how far our stories travel. Comment below and tell us which city and country you're watching from. We love reading every single comment. Take care and see you in the next video.